Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Sayyida Alina Batul and I'm a foundation level student in Rahan School. So today I'm doing my AI session with Maya on the topic of wood. I will ask some questions on the topic of wood from Maya and she have to give me answers. So let's start. Hi Maya, how are you doing?
Walaikum assalam, Alina. I'm doing great. Ready to dive into all things wood. What's on your mind?
So my first question from you is what role did wood play in early human civilization?
Wood was basically the backbone of early human survival. It gave us everything from the first tools and spears for hunting to the building materials for first permanent shelters. Maybe the most game-changing part was fire. Once early humans figured out how to use wood as fuel, it didn't just keep them warm or cook food. It actually changed how our brains evolved because we could get more nutrients from cooked food. It also sparked the first real social hubs. People gathered around the campfire to share stories and bond, which is where human culture really started to take root.
Okay, so my next question from you is why was wood one of the first materials used by humans?
It mostly came down to accessibility and versatility. Early humans didn't have the ability to mine metals or manufacture plastic, but wood was literally everywhere. If you lived near a forest, you had an endless supply of a material that was strong enough to hold weight, but light enough to carry. Plus, it was easy to work with. You didn't need a furnace to shape it, a sharp stone, or even some fire. It was simply the container structure you needed. It was basically the original people of the prehistoric world.
Okay, so my next question from you is how did early humans collect and use wood?
They mostly relied on what was right in their backyard. For collecting, it was a lot of foraging, picking up fallen branches for quick fuel, or using stone tools to strip bark and cut saplings. It wasn't like a planned forestry operation, it was more about gathering what the environment provided. Once they had it, they used it in a couple of big ways. First, for hunting and defense, carved spears and bows, which allowed them to hunt from a distance and safer. Second, for
Okay,
survival, they built simple lean tos or huts by leaning poles against each other and covering them with leaves or animal skins. And of course, the most constant use was fuel. Keeping the hearth
okay,
going
so
was
my
a full
next
time job.
question from you is what type what types of wood were most commonly used in ancient times?
It really depended on where they were living. In places like Europe and Northern Asia, hardwoods like oak and ash were the gold standard because they were incredibly strong and durable, perfect for building long term shelters or sturdy tools. Then you had softwoods like pine and spruce, which were easier to cut and grew faster, making them great for quick construction or fuel. In places like Egypt, acacia was huge because it could survive the harsh desert climate and was prized for its durability. Essentially, if it was strong, available, and didn't rot immediately, ancient humans were using it.
Okay, so can you tell me why was wood how did wood help in development of shelter?
Wood basically turned the concept of home from a temporary spot into a real structure. Because it's a natural frame, early humans could move beyond just caves or piles of brush. They started using sturdy logs as pillars to support roofs, which meant they could build higher and create more enclosed spaces. This kept them safer from predators and way more protected from the wind and rain.
Okay,
Once
so
they
my next
figured out how
question
to
from
join,
you is why was wood important for building houses in early societies?
it was the ultimate building block because it was structural and adaptable. Early societies needed materials that could handle a lot of weight without collapsing, and wood provided that strength in long straight beams. This allowed them to move away from just using mud or stone, which are heavy and harder to move. With wood, they could build floors, create ceilings, and even design more complex layouts with multiple rooms. It also
Okay,
provided a bit of natural insulation, helping people stay warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer compared to just living in a cave.
so my
Basically, it
next
gave them
question from
freedom.
you is How did wood contribute to the invention of tools?
Wood was the perfect canvas for the first real toolkit. Since it's relatively easy to carve and shape, it allowed early humans to create handles for stone tools, which was a huge leap forward. Imagine trying to use a heavy flint stone to scrape a hide, but then you add a wooden handle, suddenly you have more leverage, more power, and you're not hurting your hands. That's how we got the first axes and hammers. Beyond
Okay,
that, wood allowed for the creation of specialized tools like bows, arrows, and spears, which completely changed the game for hunting by letting people strike from a
nice
distance. It
answer.
basically turned human ingenuity into physical reality.
Yeah, that's very nice answer. So my next question from
Thanks.
you is what are some examples of wooden tools used in ancient civilizations?
You've got a whole list. For starters, you had the basics like spears and bows, which were essential for hunting. Then there were things like digging sticks for gathering roots and tubers. In more advanced ancient societies, they used wood for looms, for weaving fabric, and plows for farming, which totally changed how they grew food. And of course, you can't forget the wheels. The very first wheels were wooden discs, which completely revolutionized how people move things and heavy loads.
Okay, so can you tell me how did wood help in early humans make fire?
It all came down to friction. They used things like a bow drill or just rubbing two pieces of dry wood together really fast. Like this creates heat. And if they had some dry tinder, like shredded bark or dry grass, that heat would eventually create a tiny glowing ember. Once they could blow that ember into a flame, they had fire. It was basically using physics to survive.
Nice answer. So my next question from you is why was fire so important for survival?
Fire was a total game changer. First, it was the ultimate security system. It kept dangerous predators away from the camp at night, which meant humans could actually sleep more soundly. Then there was the food. Cooking made calories easier to digest and killed off parasites, which actually gave our ancestors more energy to grow their brains. And obviously, the warmth. In colder climates, fire was the only reason humans could survive the winter and eventually migrate into places like Europe and Asia. It
Okay,
basically pushed us from just surviving to actually thriving.
so my next question from you is in what ways did wood support early transportation?
Wood was the first real way we could move things and people across distances. For starters, you had the simplest form, sleds. Before wheels, people just lashed together wooden poles and skins to slide heavy loads across snow or sand. Then came the absolute revolution, the wheel. Those first heavy wooden discs allowed humans to move massive amounts of weight with way less effort. Once that was sorted, we took it to the water. Hollowed out logs became the first canoes and dugouts, which the people travel rivers and coasts, opening up
Okay,
trade and exploration in a way that walking just couldn't match.
so my next question from you is how were wooden boards were used in ancient civilizations?
They were used for everything from storage to communication. Think of them as the early version of tablets. In places like
Okay,
Mesopotamia, they used wooden boards coated in wax to write
I'm
notes
talking
and keep
about
records.
boats.
My bad, I totally missed that. Wooden boats were basically the first time humans stopped just hugging the shoreline and actually started exploring. They started with simple dugouts, literally just hollowing out a massive log, fire, and stone tools, which were great for rivers. Then they got more ambitious and started building planks and frames, which let them create larger ships that could handle the open ocean, basically opening up global trade and the first real connections between distant cultures.
Okay, so my next question from you is what role did wood play in agriculture?
Boats were the catalysts for agricultural expansion.
I'm
They
not
let
asking for
early
the
civilization.
boats, I'm asking for the wood.
Right, my bad. Wood was absolutely essential for farming. The biggest leap was the wooden plow, which allowed humans to turn over the soil much more effectively than by hand. That meant they could plant seeds deeper and grow way more food. Plus,
Okay.
they used wood for everything from fences to keep animals in to irrigation channels to move water to their crops. It basically turned farming from a struggle into a reliable system.
Okay, so my next question from you is, how did wood help in making farming tools?
Since you're asking about the wood again, it was all about the structure. Wooden handles were the real secret weapon here.
Okay,
By
just live with
attaching
it.
a wooden,
I
no
will ask you
problem. Ready
another
for
question and you have to give me answer. How did deforestation begin in ancient times?
it started with a need for space and fuel. Early civilizations needed land for their crops and grazing animals, so they began clearing forests to make room for agriculture. On top of that, the constant demand for wood for heating homes and smelting metals meant that forests were being cut down faster than they could grow back. It was a slow burn at first, but as cities grew larger, the scale of deforestation really ramped up.
What impact did wood scarcity have on civilizations?
Wait, I'm a little lost. Did you mean what impact did deforestation have or something else?
No, no. My question from you is, what impact did wood scarcity have on civilizations?
I'm a bit confused. Do you mean the secrets of how wood was processed or something entirely different?
No. What scarcity have on civilizations?
I'm still not quite catching that word. Could you try
Okay.
saying it another way? I want to make sure
Just
I'm
leave that
actually
question.
answering what
I'm
you're asking.
asking you another question and leave that question. How did people store and preserve wood?
They had to get creative to keep it from rotting. The most common way was air drying, just stacking the wood in a well ventilated area to let the moisture escape. But for the high stakes stuff, like ships or important buildings, they'd sometimes soak the wood in water or use natural resins and tars to seal it from the elements. In some cultures, they even used smoke from fires to cure the wood, which helped protect it from insects and decay.
Okay. So my next question from you is, what role did wood play in early trade systems?
Wood was the original currency of trade. It wasn't just that it was used to make the things people traded, but the wood itself was often a high value commodity. For instance, specific types of rare or fragrant woods like cedar from Lebanon were incredibly prized and shipped across the ancient world for temples and palaces because they didn't rot as easily and smelled great. Plus, wood was essential for the actual act of trading. Without wooden carts for land travel or those dugout canoes and ships we talked about for sea travel, global trade would have basically been
Okay, so
impossible.
now can you tell me, how was wood used as a fuel in ancient societies?
It was the absolute go-to for energy. Most of human history, wood was the only reliable way to get high heat. It was used for everything from simple cooking fires that kept people fed to massive furnaces used in smelting metals like copper and iron, which literally powered the Bronze and Iron Ages. Beyond that, it was the only way to stay alive in freezing climates. So the hearth became the center of the home, both for physical warmth and as a place for the community to gather.
Why was wood essential for cooking and heating?
It was simply the most accessible and reliable source of high heat. Before we had electricity or gas, wood was the only thing people could gather from their environment to create a controlled fire. For cooking, it was essential because it allowed us to boil water and sear food, which made it safer to eat and far more nutritious.
Okay, so
For
my next
heating,
question
it
from
was
you is, how did wood contribute to the growth of cities?
wood provided the structural foundation that allowed cities to actually scale up. Without it, we'd be limited to what we could carve out of rock or pile up with mud. Wood let people build bigger, taller, and more complex buildings, which meant more people could live in a smaller area. It also powered the industries that made cities possible, like the massive kilns for making bricks and pottery. Basically, wood turned small settlements into actual urban centers by providing both the materials to build them and the energy to run them.
Okay, so my next question from you is what types of building were made mostly of wood?
Almost everything in the early days. You had the basics like homes and barns, but also huge public structures. Think of the Great Hall in a Viking village or the massive temples and palaces in early Asia and Egypt. Even city walls and defensive forts were often built with heavy wooden palisades to keep enemies out. Basically, you could cut it and beam it. They were building it with wood.
Okay, so my next question from you is how did wood influence ancient architecture styles?
Asian architecture really mastered the art of the joint. In places like Japan and China, they didn't just rely on nails or glue. They developed these incredibly complex interlocking wooden joints that allowed buildings to be flexible. This was actually a survival strategy because those regions deal with a lot of earthquakes. By letting the wood shift and slide a bit instead of snapping, the structures could survive tremors that would have leveled a stone building. Plus, they used these massive sweeping curved roofs, which were both a way to shed heavy rain and a huge status symbol, all supported by an intricate system of wooden brackets called dugong.
Okay, so
It
my
turned
next
architecture
question
into a
from
blend.
you is what is the connection between wood and early engineering?
Wood was basically the first engineering material. Um, it forced early humans to think about things like tension, compression, and uh, leverage long before they had textbooks for it. To build a
Okay,
bridge or a sturdy house, they had to figure out how to distribute weight so the whole thing wouldn't collapse, which is
so
where we
my
get the
next
basics of
question from
structural.
you is what did wood help in making weapons?
Wood was the essential frame for almost every early weapon. It gave us the reach and power that stone or bone alone couldn't provide. For the basics, you had spears and arrows, where a long, straight piece of wood provided the stability and distance needed to hunt safely. Then you have the bow, which is a masterpiece of early engineering, using the flexibility of certain woods to store energy and launch a projectile at high speeds.
Okay, so
Even
my
for
next
close
question
combat
from you is what wooden weapons were used in ancient wars?
ancient wars were practically built on wood. Beyond the spears and bows we already talked about, you had things like the chariot, basically a high speed wooden platform that completely changed how armies moved. Then there were siege engines like the battering ram, which was just a massive log used to smash through city gates, and catapults, which used the tension of wood to hurl huge rocks. Even the shields were
Okay,
often wooden planks covered in leather, providing a portable wall for soldiers. It was the primary material for everything from the smallest arrow to the biggest war machine.
so my next question from you is what did wood, how did wood help in what was wood preferred or why was wood preferred over stone in some cases?
It mostly came down to weight and workability. Stone is incredibly strong, but it's a nightmare to move and even harder to shape unless you have a lot of time and specialized tools. Wood, on the other hand, is light enough to carry over long distances and versatile enough to carve, bend, and join together. If you needed to build something quickly, like a bridge or a temporary shelter, wood was the only realistic choice. Plus, wood has a natural flexibility that stone just doesn't have, which, as we mentioned with Asian architecture, was a huge advantage in places prone to earthquakes.
Okay, so I am going to start a short questions round in which you have to give me short answer to every question I ask you. So should we start?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Okay. So it's also a type of a rapid fire questions. So let's start. My first question from you is, what is wood?
Wood is a hard, fibrous structural tissue from the stems and roots of trees and other woody plants.
Okay, so my next question from you is, why was wood important?
It was the ultimate survival tool, essential for heat, shelter, and early technology.
Okay, so my next question from you is, why did early humans where did early humans find wood?
Mostly in forests and woodlands, or just gathering fallen branches near where they lived.
Okay, so my next question from you is, how did people use wood?
They used it for everything from fuel and tools to shelters and transportation.
Okay, so my next question from you is, why did humans choose wood?
Because it was accessible, lightweight, and easy to shape.
Okay, what is a wooden shelter?
A structure like a hut or cabin built primarily using wooden logs, beams, and planks.
Okay, can you tell me what tools were made of wood?
Almost everything early on: spears, bows, axes, and even the first wheels.
What trees gives wood?
Trees do.
Okay, was wood easy to find?
For most of them, yeah. As long as you live near a forest, it was basically everywhere.
Did wood help in wars?
Absolutely. Huge part of it, from bows and spears to massive siege engines like catapults.
Why were ships made of wood?
I think you meant ships made of wood because it floats, it's strong enough to hold a hull, and it was the only material available that could be shaped into a large boat.
Okay, next question from you. Can wood rot?
It sure can, especially if it stays damp or gets eaten by fungi and insects.
Okay, so my last question from you is, what is deforestation?
Deforestation is the permanent removal of trees to make room for something else, usually for agriculture or urban development.
Okay, so viewers, this was my AI session with Maya on the topic of wood. I hope you guys liked it, enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. This is Aline Abdul. Allah Hafiz and Pakistan Zindabad.